I'm Christine, and welcome to Series 2 of Unmuzzled at 67. Boom! We're here. We've actually done it, and we've survived Series 1. So here we are. This series is called Surviving Without a Soul. And this episode is called Unexpected and Life-Changing. But I'm going to start with some personal reflection again about Series 1. And the reason for that is that the videos are filmed ahead of time. So when you were watching the videos, so was I. That's the first time I had actually seen them, although I had filmed them. And I have to say that watching them was, particularly in their time sequence, was really quite emotional for me. And I have to say it was even a wee bit unnerving. And there were, from my side, lots of tears and snotters, but absolutely no regrets. But, you know, my initial idea to tell my life story was to write a book. But it became apparent very quickly that I do not have those skills. I mean, for me, it's a very skillful job to write a book. And much as I wanted to, that just wasn't going to happen. So as I was a fan of podcasts, particularly Joe Rogan, and had been watching podcasts for maybe about 5 years, looking at Joe Rogan, or anything, of course, that my absolute favourite David Goggins was guesting in, I thought maybe I'll just investigate and see what is going on in Glasgow for podcasting, see what's available. It didn't occur to me to think about equipment and all that for my, you know, to do it myself. I mean, that just would have been insane for me to think about that. It never occurred to me at the time that it might not be possible to tell a story or to be a sole podcaster. That didn't occur to me that wouldn't be possible, because all podcasts I had seen were about interviewing. And it also didn't occur to me that at 67 I might be too old, you know, to try my hand at something so new and really populated maybe mostly by younger people than me. But none of those occurred to me, not even once. But then I got lucky. I got really lucky, because I found the Glasgow podcast studio. I found Cam and Mark. And after a short, almost interview or chat, they agreed to take me on. They agreed to take on this pensioner with a dream to tell their story in a podcast and nothing else to bring to the table. I keep saying it, all the gear and the idea, and that's exactly what it was like. Cam has guided me patiently through the process, and fortunately we did get to the end of Series 1 and we both seem to still be quite sane. Huge thanks to you, Cam, seriously. And I feel you really kind of allowed me to enjoy the process more than I would have thought, because Cam has been so encouraging. He's even put me on TikTok now as well. So in case you didn't know that. So getting back to the podcast, there are some truly standout moments for me as I was watching them. And those were meeting two incredible people who I called my angels with wings. And I'm sorry if you've heard this before, but it is so important for me to talk about this again. In episode 7, there was Catherine. And Catherine took me in when I was in a very troubling situation, with no one to turn to, and I needed to be rescued, and I needed to be kept safe, and I needed to be reassured. To me, this is real friendship. I mean, this was a person I didn't even really know that long. A person who, without hesitation, sees you're in trouble, opens their heart and their home for much needed refuge. And she only asked me one question. What else can I do for you, Christine? Stay here as long as you want. You are so welcome. So wherever you are in the world today, Catherine, please know I am eternally grateful to you and your family for giving me a home and a breathing space that took me out of harm's way. Then in episode 8, there was Jimmy, another angel without wings, who was standing by in the shadows, keeping an eye on me. Little did I know that at the time. And when he was needed, he swooped in and grabbed me and put me under his wings, and he put me on the right path. He became my sponsor in AA, and he guided and befriended me when I was at rock bottom. I was on my knees, mentally, physically and spiritually. He was a true angel. We were friends for decades until he passed away. It seems that somehow I was meant to survive. It almost seems that I survived in spite of myself. Maybe to experience such remarkable examples of friendship as these two. But, you know, facing up to being an addict is hard. It's hard at any age, but at 24, I thought my life would be over. I thought I'd become boring and flat. And I might lose my larger-than-life personality. But that wasn't the case at all, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. When Jimmy took me on, I was in a shocking state. I was 24 and I looked 54. My life was out of control in every sense. I was lost, confused, and not living in the real world. I'd been trying to keep it together, to hold on to my job because I needed money for drink. That was my all-consuming thought. But the day did finally come when my behaviour was out of control and I was about to be sacked from my job. And Jimmy stepped forward, a man I had never met, and saved my job, and he saved me. The friends or people I was going around with at that time weren't able to hold down a job. They were thieves, they were shoplifters, and they just did what they had to do to survive. And there's no doubt that's the way that I was heading to. There's no one-size-fits-all story of how every addict gets to AA. Everyone reaches rock bottom in their own way. There's no stereotypical journey. And I hope you found it insightful to find out a little bit about how AA works, and that applies to NA and GA as well, because the policies, not policies, but the procedures are all the same. No matter which of those that you join. So I hope that, I mean, if you're not an alcoholic, you wouldn't really know about that, and maybe you found it interesting. I felt it was important to mention it. I was definitely ready when I got to AA. I was done. I was ready to do whatever they told me and to stop living the life that I was living. And as for losing my personality, for fuck's sake, I should have been praying that that would be the first thing to go. When I had a drink in me, I was obnoxious, loud, needed to be the centre of attention. And this is the worst thing. The worst thing ever was if somebody walked into the pub, I would focus on... Now, the word I've written down here is flaws. It's no really flaws. It's like if you've had a big nose, or if you had, let's say, funny ears or protruding teeth, I would be fucking on you like a rash. This is the kind of thing I would say. Excuse me, have you considered plastic surgery? You can't be walking about like this. There can be help for you, you know. There can be help for you. And people would be fucking dragging me away, you know, keep away. And you know, the person that you were insulting would be ready for knocking you out. You know, it was drawing attention to something that they didn't want. So I was just a fucking pest. We've all met drunks like that, just an absolute pest. I could cause trouble in an empty house. So I was glad to see the back of that. And I also wanted to take a moment to think about my poor mum and dad. Everything that I put them through. And sadly, what I'm about to put them through in series 2 as well. They were really good people, and they were in the most challenging circumstances. They were out of their depth with me. They didn't even understand why I had turned into this person that I had, and they had no idea how to cope with me. Quite recently, I was reading an autobiography of Lou Reed. I'm a big fan of Lou Reed and, you know, the people going around at that era, in the US. And in case you haven't heard of him, he was a musician, singer, songwriter, 60s, 70s. So he was kind of being brought up in a similar time to me. And he was out of control, and his parents were just ready to wash their hands of him. They just didn't know what to do with him. I think it was a little bit worse than me, you know, tanning cars and things like that. But his parents just didn't know what to do. Parents went to their doctor. They said, listen, you know what we're doing with people like that now? Shock treatment. So they said, I think that's what you should do. So that's what they did. They put him into a hospital, and he had shock treatment over a period of months. Now that, to us nowadays, you're like, what? Seriously? But yeah, that really was a thing, and it's gone on up until fairly recently. I think somebody told me it was going on up until the 90s. So Lou Reed mentioned that it completely changed him. It completely changed him as a person, completely changed his personality, and also he lost a lot of his memory as well. So life could have been a lot fucking worse for me if I'd been living in the USA. So moving on. Let's talk about what I actually covered in series 1. No, in no particular order. It's quite a big list, as you might know if you've watched the podcast. Sexual assault, understanding what trauma was, that being the first step to me trying to understand my behaviour and try to understand myself. We mentioned about me selling drugs in Sucky Hall Street. Dealing with venereal disease. I mean, this is all when I was sort of 15 actually, and having to go to the infamous Blackstreet clinic to get treatment. There was anorexia, and what I was told at that time, that I was really asked to come in for treatment, and I didn't go. But what I was told was that because of the way that my anorexia had worked with me, was that there was a very good chance that I could be infertile. And in fact, the chances of me having a child naturally were very slim. Keep that in your mind. Then there were 2 attempted suicides, and what the psychiatrist that I was asked to report to, what he told me then. And that stayed with me for most of my life. Even now I can recall that as if it was it's the most frightening thing anyone has ever said to me. Then there was being a fag hag in the gay scene in the 70s in Glasgow and in Jersey as well, which was brilliant and such happy times for me. Then there was moving from Glasgow to Jersey. And then what I encountered when I was in Jersey, which I think we could probably put under the umbrella of domestic violence. And then lastly, admitting to being an alcoholic and finding myself in AA. So maybe you're thinking to yourself, surely to God it's got to be plain sailing for that wee woman now. But no, it's not. The madness continues. So let's pick up the story. Let's start on series 2, and we pick up the story when I'm kind of in my late 20s. I'm now sober. I'm now back in Glasgow, and I'm skinny as well. I've lost a lot of weight. So if you're sitting comfortably, I'll begin. So I was a wee bit nervous, about bumping into any of my old drinking buddies, but actually I never did. I steered clear of the old drinking haunts, and it was good to be home, although my parents were a wee bit apprehensive. They'd never spent any time with me at all being sober, so they weren't really very sure about what this was going to involve. For me, it was great to be a daughter once again, because I'd been living down south and living in flats and living in a hotel accommodation, and it was just nice to be back in a house and nice to be back with my parents again. So I started to make new friends, wee bit of socialising, you know, because my life felt quite flat. You know, I was working in a hotel and going to AA meetings. That was it. And so by chance, I bumped into this guy that I had met a few years earlier. He's quite handsome. He was good company, and he asked me out. So a wee romance kind of blossomed. But this was my first sort of relationship sober. So it was a little bit unnerving for me as well. There was a wee bit of apprehension as well, doing this with absolutely no bevy to prop me up. So, of course, you know, he would be phoning me at home and that, you know, making a date and things. And I wanted to quickly tell you how that worked in the 80s. In the 80s, in this home, in fact, I think in most homes in the very early 80s, there was no mobile phones. There was a landline, and that was for use for the whole family. Ours was kept on top of a telephone table, a table that was actually designed just for a phone, and a matching telephone stool for the quite long conversations. So on top of the table would be the notepad, pen, just in case you had to write anything down, and also the phone itself. But our hall was a tiny wee hall. The table took up the full width of the hall practically. So if you were on the phone, people were squeezing past you. You know, people in your family were squeezing past you to either get to the bathroom or get to the kitchen. And of course, my mother's sort of going, "Who's that? Who's that on the phone?" You know, and I'm fucking leave us alone, you know, and kind of earwigging, you know, as she's walking past. So it was a fucking trial to keep a relationship going when you were living in a house like that. And many people lived in houses like that. There was absolutely no privacy whatsoever. But anyway, this wee relationship was kind of over before it got started. And there was no drama llama. It was just something that kind of faded out. So it was a good experience for me, you know, to be trying a relationship sober. And I don't think any of us were really bothered. It just kind of filtered out. But then I missed 2 periods. My periods had been quite erratic since anorexia a few years earlier. And I was remembering, you know, to myself about what that guy said to me. You know, the doctor had said to me again about probably not being able to conceive naturally, probably needing to maybe even get IVF. And, you know, the chances of conceiving were very slim. So I knew all that. But I also knew this was different. I also knew that I felt different. I couldn't face my usual morning coffee. I had those tender boobs. And of course, my mother was getting her bit in. "Oh, aye, what's the matter with you? Can you drink your coffee in the morning now?" And the knowing look. But I actually think she was afraid to believe what she was thinking. So what you did in those days was, if you were pregnant, you went to the doctor with a urine sample and you would phone back. I think it was about a week or that later to get your result. So in our surgery was an open plan surgery where there was a desk, and in front of the desk were all the chairs lined up horizontally, and that's where all the patients sat. There was absolutely no privacy. And when you were getting your results, they came from the receptionist. They didn't actually come from the doctor. So I'm phoning the doctor and I'm asking for the results of my test. I'm fully expecting negative, absolutely. And the woman said, "Oh yes, Mrs. McCormack, your test is positive." Now wait till I tell you this. This is fucking unbelievable. In amongst those patients was my mother. So we actually both found out at the same time that I was pregnant. Now, the chances of that have got to be what? 1,000 to 1? But that is what happened. So I don't know this, of course. I'm sitting in the house and I'm trying to get my head around what I've just been told, and I'm thinking, well, you know, this child's been born against all the odds, you know. There was never a question that I would not have this child. There's never a question that was going to happen, because for me it was a miracle. A child was going to be born against every odds that was given. So I'm sitting in the house trying to get my head around this, and a minute later, or it seemed like a minute later, my mum burst into the living room like a fucking raging bull. How could you let this happen? She says, you're not a young lassie now. This is just unbelievable. Another thing you're throwing at us, another thing we're going to have to cope with. And she went upstairs to her room. She came down with a box, quite a big size, a big box, and it obviously was white at one point. It wasn't white now, it was like in a beigey colour now. And she lifted the lid off, threw it down, and in the right hand here, she had a pair of pinking shears. Now, I don't even know if they exist now, but they were kind of riveted scissors that people that were seamstresses used. So she lifts out this garment and she starts cutting it up with these pinking shears and ripping it up with her hands. And she's saying, well, you won't be fucking needing this now, will you? I'm just, you know, kind of sitting like this thinking, what the fuck? Because again, I just couldn't get my head around that she even actually knew. So I was shocked, and she's throwing the bits at me, you know, the bits, and she's just ripping this to shreds. And the sad thing was, it turned out that was her wedding dress, and she had been keeping that for me, you know, to get married in. And of course it was white. So I still couldn't understand how she knew. Just took myself out the room, took myself out the living room and up to my room and fucking just about barricaded myself in. That she's shouting up to me, you know, you need to leave. I cannot cope with this at all. I thought we were done with all this stuff now you were sober. I can't deal with it. You'll need to get a flat and you'll need to move out. And I mean, as quickly as you possibly can. So I did know a woman that kind of let flats out, and she says, I'll give you this wee flat now. I said, listen, I've not got that much money. Make it a cheap flat. It's only for me anyway. She says, right, okay then. So get a flat. I moved out quite quickly, maybe just over a week, and I was away. And I decided at the same time that I would leave my job in hotels, because I'd had a conversation with two female friends, both owned hairdressing salons, and both said to me, I don't know why you're working in a hotel, Christine. You've got all that experience with all the makeup when you were younger. Why don't you not just go back to that? We're always getting asked in the salon if you know anybody that can do the makeup for the weddings, because they would be doing the hair for the weddings. She says, we're getting asked all the time. I could book you out non-stop. So I says, all right. So I left my job, I got some holiday pay, and with the holiday pay, I invested all of it into the kit I was going to need. So it was quite a big kit. You know, if you can imagine, for makeup, you need every colour of moisturiser, every imaginable colour of eyeshadow. You need mascaras, you need moisturisers for oily skin, for this, for that. So it took all of the money that I had, and I had to invest in one of these big cases, you know, with all the wee shelves in it for putting all your makeup in. And so that's what I decided to do, and I absolutely loved it. I loved the socialising of it. I loved going from salon to salon because they were quite near, and all the gabbing and the patter and being part of something. And I also was being quite creative, and I quite liked that as well. And I loved being part of somebody's specialty. It was brilliant. But I didn't make much money at it, and it was just enough to pay my rent and something to eat, and no very much left over. So my parents just cut themselves off for me, and, you know, that was the right thing for them to do. But I was happy. I was pregnant, but I was lonely, because at night time I would just go back to my wee flat myself with not much money, but I would just say, doesn't matter, I'm having a miracle baby, so I'll be fine. My friends at this time were successful women. They all had their own businesses. They all were I'm not saying wealthy, but they certainly were successful, successful people. And they would often give their opinion from their perspective of being a single mother. But I mean, it was nothing like mine. I would get caught up in their kind of fairy tale idea of what it would be like. Well, it wouldn't be a fairy tale to them because they had the money. They would be able to get a nanny to help and a nice pram and all the other things. And here was my personal situation could not have been more opposite. I had no money. There was no spare income from month to month. There was no maternity pay to help me get by. How the fuck was I going to cope? No. I wasn't ready to face the reality. Even in the latter stages of pregnancy, I had no idea what it was going to be like to be a mother, and I was not going to face it. I was delusional, and that was a state of mind that was not uncommon to me. But still, I kept going with my makeup. And I branched out. I put a wee advert in the Evening Times, and I said I would go to people's houses. Mobile, I think that's what I called it, mobile makeup artist. Oh, we're away now. I mean, if people had been getting married during the week, I would have made a fortune and loved every second of it. But in those days, people only get married on Saturdays. So you were very capped at what you were able to make. So I didn't drive at that time. So I'm on and off the buses, having to almost leave at the fucking crack of dawn to make sure you're never late because, people panic if you become late. So, and it was absolutely brilliant. So my favourite places were Castlemilk, Barlanark, Drumchapel, Easterhouse, and occasionally I would go over to the dark side. I'd go to Newton Mearns and sometimes Bearsden. But primarily my work was coming from these other areas. So, I mean, I could write a book just about the fabulous times I had in people's houses, in some of the situations you would arrive at somebody's house, somebody would come to the door and say, "Are you the makeup lassie?" And I'd say, "Aye." And they'd say, "That's her here. You want our own sausage?" I put our own sausage on for the lassie. You want a penguin? I get a penguin and not tea. So you're immediately involved straight away in the family. And sometimes you'd get asked to iron maybe the dad of the bride's shirt, or, going to fix him hen, and you just get involved, and there'd be an Alsatian wandering about, and sometimes coming in between my legs when I was trying to do the makeup, and it would just sit there and they say, "Oh, he likes you." So you couldn't really move, but all of it was just fun for me, and I always had such a lovely welcome in these areas, and some really good tips, really generous people. And also from those weddings I would get other weddings, because maybe I would be doing a bridesmaid today at this house, but then that bridesmaid would be getting married and she would book me. So I was booked for Saturdays, for months and months ahead. But then, of course, again, in the winter, people didn't really get married in the winter either. So you were really capped at what you could make. And it was such a shame because I had such an absolutely brilliant time. So what the end of this is, I decided to stop taking the work in Bearsden and Bishopbriggs. Now, I want to make it very clear, this is just my experience, and it is going back to the 80s. So I have to just be honest, and this was my experience. So when I did makeups in these other areas, my experience was that sometimes people would say, "Do you want a coffee? Nothing to eat, or a biscuit? And I was sometimes be in people's houses for 4 hours, And even sometimes if I said, "Excuse me, where is the toilet?" It would be like, as if it was a bother, as if it was money of the staff, and very rarely got a tip. So I just decided, I'm not going to the dark side anymore. I'm going where the real people are. So I stopped I didn't take any more bookings for those areas, and just stuck to the areas where I was made to feel the most welcome and enjoyed. Just people took me into their heart and really enjoyed, and of course brilliant tips. So I carried on doing this, keep myself fit with this huge big case Really, really heavy. And I enjoyed every single wedding that I was a part of. So that, friends, is where I'm going to leave this episode, the first episode of season 2. So thank you as always for joining me today. It's always great to have your company. Next week, let's discuss, maybe we can all discuss together, divine intervention, because I would love to know what you think about some of the story that's going to be appearing next week. Now remember, the podcast always comes out on a Wednesday. If you're enjoying the podcasts, please tell your friends and family, because the more the merrier. So thanks for joining me. See you next week.